Hello guys, welcome to eForm Advanced Tutorials where we'll be talking about advanced concepts regarding form management. In this video we will see how we can use conditional logic to set up a complex form. Now obviously to get started we need to create a form first from eForm and then new form. We're going to set the form name to something like Conditional Logic. Set the form type to tabular appearance to show how we can use conditional logic on containers as well, and start by adding a container. To demonstrate, we are going to add two form elements to our form, one single option and one multiple option. We are going to set up the single option element first. Please select one option and we are going to leave the list of options as it is. It can be anything you want, it really doesn't matter. By default the options are option 1, option 2, option 3, etc. We are also going to set up the multiple options. Please select more than one option and add a new option to this element, say option 4. For demonstrating the conditional logic, we are going to add a design element, the heading element, and we are going to name it our conditional element. Now to apply conditional logic on this element, we first need to enable the system by enabling this toggle button. We can set the initial status and the final status. By default the initial status is hidden and the final status is shown. That is, if the conditions are met, then the element will be shown, otherwise it will stay hidden. Now to add some logic, we click on the add new logic button where we have to set the element type. Now we are going to add logic against the single options element, where the element type is M, as you can see it's written here, and the key of the element is 0. So we just set up accordingly. Element type M and key 0 has value which equals to, it can be not equals to, greater than, less than, contains, does not contain, starts with, ends with. The options are quite self-explaining. We are going to stick to the equals to for now. So we are going to show this heading element if single options element has an option selected which equals to the label of the option, that is option 1. It can be option 2 or option 3. Now we save the form and we are going to view it. As you can see, the design element is not shown, but if we are to select option 1 from the first form element, then it shows up. If we select option 3 or option 2, then it simply does not. Now we are going to edit our form again to show grouping of conditional logic. Now we would like to show this element when option 1 is selected for the first element and option 2 is selected for the second element. So we add a new logic and we set it that M1 has value which equals to option 2 and set the relationship to AND. So the logic says show this element if M0 has value which equals to option 1 and M1 has value which equals to option 2. Let's save the setting and see how the form behaves. So we select option 1 from the first element and option 2 from the second element, then only the conditional element shows up. If we select anything else, then it does not. So that's how grouping happens. We can also have OR grouping. In this case we have added a new element called thumbnail selection. As you can see, there are 4 options built into this element. You can modify them accordingly, it doesn't matter. What matters is what you have written inside the options column. In our case, the options are briefcase, calendar, credit card, Chrome, etc. It can be anything, it really doesn't matter. So we are going to show this conditional element if option 1 and option 2 are selected for the first and second element respectively, or if the thumbnail selection has at least one option selected. So we are going to add another one which is going to say M2 has length. Notice that we are going to show this if at least one of the options in thumbnail selection is selected. It doesn't matter which one. So we are going to use the length in this case, which is greater than 0. And we are going to set the logic, the relational logic to OR. We save it. So the logics are grouped against OR, which means that the element is going to show up if option 1 and option 2 is selected for the first and second elements respectively, or at least one of the options from the thumbnail selection is checked by the user, as you can see. So that's how grouping happens. Now we are going to see how we can refer to a particular option of the thumbnail element. So in our case, the options are briefcase, calendar, credit card and Chrome respectively. We would like to show this if user selects Chrome. So we change this column to value. M2 has value which equals to Chrome. Save the settings. And that's how it's going to work. If you are going to select Chrome, then only this conditional element will show up, otherwise it will stay hidden. Note that the conditional logic is grouped against OR. So if any of the grouping, that is if M0 has value which equals to option 1 and M1 has value which equals to option 2, if set to true, then the element will show up, or even if M2 has value which equals to Chrome, then also the element will show up. You can click on this tiny help icon to read what I am talking about. That is, if the logic is defined as C1 and C2 or C2, then if C1 and C2 or C2 is interpreted as true, then the element will show up. Okay, so now let's see how conditional logic behaves for different elements. Single option, multiple option, drop down option, thumbnail selections are all the same. Now let us talk about single slider and single range. So we delete all of the conditions from here, and we are going to set up a condition to make this element show up if the single slider has a value which is greater than 5. So we're going to add a new logic which is going to say M3. As you can see, M3 is the ID of this element. M3 has value which is greater than 5. We also edit the configuration of this single slider element to let the user put a value between 1 and 10. Save it. Refresh the form. We select 5, the element doesn't show up because 5 is not greater than 5. We select 6, then our conditional element shows up. Same thing happens with range as well. So we set up logic against range, that is M4 has value which is greater than 5. Save the settings, save the form, reload the form. As you can see, if user has selected a pair of value for which any of the values greater than 5, then our conditional element will show up. Same logic applies for smiley rating, star rating, scale rating, spinners, multiple grading, etc. For matrix questions, the columns, the label of the columns will correspond to the value. For example, for this element, the label of the columns are column 1 and column 2 respectively. So if we are to apply a logic against matrix element, then what we will do is we first set up the ID, and then we are going to say that this matrix question has value which equals to column 1. Remember, column 1 is the label of the first column of our matrix element. So if user chooses column 1 for any of the row, then our conditional element will show up. For like and dislike and toggle options, the values are 0 and 1 respectively, if depending on whether user has enabled the element or disabled it. For example, we would like to show our conditional element if user has selected like. So for this we set the ID, that is M7 has value which equals to 1. We save it, refresh the form, and if users sorry, it should have been M6. So if user selects like, then our conditional element shows up. If user selects dislike, then it does not. If you want to show it up, if user selects dislike, then you simply set the value to 0. Now our conditional element will show up if user dislikes. Same logic is applied for toggle option as well. If the status of the toggle is set to enabled, then the value will be interpreted to 1. And if it's disabled, then the value will be interpreted to 0. In our case, the conditional element is set to show if the toggle option is set to 0. That is when it is set to off. Now we are going to see some feedback elements. We are going to take this feedback small text for demonstration. Please input your text. We are going to save it, and we are going to put conditional logic against this feedback element. So we set the type to F with ID set to 0, has value which contains, say for example, eForm. So according to our logic, if user writes something in this element which contains the word eForm in it, then only our conditional element will show up. For example, I'm going to write I love eForm. So eForm is included in my input text, hence our conditional element started to show up. Now for file upload, the value is interpreted to the number of files uploaded. For GPS tracker, it will be the value in any of these 3 text inputs, namely address, latitude and longitude. So we would like to show our element if user lives in Delhi, for example. We set the settings, refresh the form. So I'm going to input an address manually, which is going to say Delhi. I'm sorry, I didn't set the key properly. It should be 1. So I'm going to input an address again. Something seems to be off. If F1 has value which contains Delhi. My bad. Refresh the form again. Yes, and now it shows up. If I'm going to put something else, say Bangalore, then it stays hidden. So that's how conditional logic works for GPS tracker. Similarly, it works for feedback matrix, as you have seen how it works for feedback small text. And for signature pad, if user has signed into the pad, then the value will be interpreted to 1, otherwise it will be interpreted to 0. You can check the link I've given in this video description to know more about how conditional logic behaves for different types of elements. Now I'm going to show you how you can add conditional logic for a container. First I'm going to demonstrate for a top level container. I'm going to put some elements in it for demonstration, and I'm going to add, first let me delete all these elements, they aren't really necessary. I'm going to keep only one single option element with options yes and no. Yes and no. The element is going to say, do you want to see the next step? So our goal is to show the hidden tab only if the user has selected yes from the previous tab. So we are going to put conditional logic on this element and set up a new logic which is going to say M0 has value which equals to yes. The values are case insensitive, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so now hold on for a second, let me just beautify the thing. It's going to say tab 1 out of 2, and this one is going to say tab 2 out of 2. Okay, so initially we cannot see the tab 2 present over here, but if we select yes, then it shows up and we can go next. If you don't select yes, then the form is asking you to submit because there aren't any other tabs to navigate to. So that's how conditional logic works for container. We can also apply conditional logic for simple container or collapsible container to group other elements inside it. For example, we're going to put simple container inside it, and for demonstration we're going to put some more elements inside it. And for this element M8, we are going to set options to yes and no. Yes and no. Title is going to say, do you want to attempt more? Save the settings, and we are going to put conditional logic to this parent container. So we're going to add a new logic and set it to M8. M8 has value which equals to yes. Now let's see how it works. So for the tab to show up, we select yes and we click on next. Now if we select yes, then the container and all the elements inside shows up. If we select no, then it does not. So that's how conditional logic nesting works. Alright, so now let's see how we can use conditional logic to set up some real world examples. In our case, we're going to start fresh with a new form, and we are going to name it website feedback, where we'll be asking users a bunch of questions to give feedback for our websites. So for that, we're going to start by adding a single option asking, do you like our website? With options, yes, sure, and kinda neutral, and no, I do not. We're going to name the tab to page 1 out of 3, and we're going to add another container in it. The second container is going to say page 2 out of 3, and we're going to group two types of questions in it. The first one will be asking user why he liked our website. The second one will be asking him or her that why he didn't like our website. So for that grouping purpose, we add two simple containers. Sorry for the noise, it was my phone ringing up. Anyway, so the first container is going to ask user about why he liked our website. Specifically, we're going to put a matrix question in it, asking him to grade the features of our website. Please rate our website. Columns are going to say very poor, poor, okay, good, very good, and the rows are going to say usability, accessibility. Now we'd also like to show up a feedback element if user has selected poor or very poor for any of the matrix rows. For that, we insert a feedback large element asking, would you like to tell us why? And we're going to show this element if M1 has value which equals to poor, or M1 has value which equals to very poor. Save it. And we also would like to show this simple container 1 if the value of M0 is set to yes sure. So we add a new logic, M0 has value which equals to yes sure. We might also show this up if user has selected OK or I'm kind of neutral. So for that, set the relation to or, M0 has value which equals to kind of neutral. Save the settings and we are going to view our form. Okay, so I'm going to select yeah sure, going to the next page and our matrix feedback shows up. I'm selected OK for all of the rows and the feedback doesn't show up, but I'm to select poor for any of the row, then it shows up asking would you like to tell us why. Anyway, so for negative feedback I'm going to ask user a bunch of questions. I'm going to ask him or her, would you like to comment on improving our site? Yes, no. And depending on this selection, I'm going to show the user another feedback large text. Thank you is right below. I'm going to put the conditional logic against M2. We show this element if M2 has value which equals to yes. And for this parent container, I'm going to put conditional logic against M0. That is if the user selects no I do not. So M0 has value which equals to no I do not. Let's refresh our form. If I am to select no I do not, then this shows up. If I am to select yes, then the feedback element also shows up, otherwise it does not. So that's how you can use conditional logic for setting up complex forms with nested elements. Well, if you want to learn more, if you are running into any sort of trouble, then please ask in our support forum. The link is given in the description. Well, thanks for watching. Have a nice day.